Welcome to MasterMind Minutes, the podcast that focuses on the franchise industry. We'll cover topics that are important to franchisees as well as franchisors and share interesting insights that will help you build your business. We have one guest, we ask one question, and we do this in minutes, not hours. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of MasterMind Minutes. My name is Gary Occhiogrosso. I'm the founder of Franchise Growth Solutions and the publisher of FranchiseMoneymaker.com. And for those of you who, as I say every week, who are new to the podcast, MasterMind Minutes is very simple. We talk about franchising, we talk about business, entrepreneurship, we give lots of tips, great hints, great insights. We have one guest, we typically have one topic or one question, and we get in and out of here in minutes, not hours. So I invite you to listen along. And today, we start our fourth season, and our first guest of the fourth season is my good friend, Tom Scarda. He is a noted franchise advisor and a coach. He's been on the program before. He's really a teacher at heart. We were talking before the program about a lot of different things there. He was the #1 franchisee of the year with his first franchise concept, and then failed miserably, which I just admire that he talks about that in the second franchise that he did and the lessons that he learned from that failure. And for those of you who are familiar with some of my, nonsense, I always talk about failing your way to success, and Tom can tell lots of stories about that. He's the author of several books, including the #1 bestseller, Franchise Savvy, which is a great book. And, I always tell people, don't just buy it, read it. He hosts his own podcast called the Franchise Academy. He's produced online master classes on investing in franchises, which is what we're going to talk about today. He's helped more than 1,800 people really determine if franchising is good for them since 2005. I just want to reiterate that. He's helped more than 1,800 people determine if franchising is good for them. I'm not saying he sold 1,800 franchises. That's what a lot of people would want to tell you. But I think it's more important that you help someone determine if it's even good for you. So Tom, before we get into the question, sort of with that as the backdrop, tell us a little bit more about your background and what you've been doing for the people who haven't met you yet.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's just, an honor to be on this show all the time. It's so great. And the education that you guys put out is amazing. So for those listening, I was born and raised in New York City, which I know you can't hear in my voice, but I was a subway conductor in New York on the trains, opening and closing doors. One day, an old timer said to me, "Hey, kid, this is a great job because you'll always have a shirt on your back." He said, "It'll never be a silk shirt, but at least you'll have a shirt." And I was like, whoa, man, that sounds like mediocrity. Like I'm working my butt off. When do I get the metaphorical silk shirt? Looked at my bosses. They were not wearing the silk shirts, but business owners were. And I realized I want to be a business owner, but how do I do it? I know nothing. I'm a government guy. I have no education. I have no real money, no pedigree. My dad was a cop. I realized that a franchise is a business with training wheels, and that's what I needed. And I ended up working with a franchise consultant with FranChoice. She matched me to a smoothie franchise. In 2000, I bought it, 3 locations, built it, sold it within 5 years, and was blessed enough to semi-retire at 41 years old. Bought a second franchise, failed, wrote a book about it called Franchise Savvy, as Gary said. And I've been helping people avoid those mistakes I made the second time around, because it's not difficult to find a franchise. It's difficult to find a good franchise.
Yeah. And that is absolute great way to put it. I think, one of the things that I want to ask you about today, and it kind of ties in with what you said, and I've had probably for the last year or so a bit of a sort of a pet peeve of what I see going on in our industry with this, this term responsible franchising, which guys like you, guys like me, we've been practicing that for 30 years. That's not news, okay? Unfortunately, there are franchisors and organizations that sort of use it as a buzzword to sell franchises. It's like the used car guy that says, "Trust me." Okay, that's always a bit of a problem. So, I guess my question to you, Tom, is what are the top 3 or 4 elements that a franchise buyer should be aware of, and what should they investigate? Not only about the franchise company, as you mentioned, but also within themselves. What are those top 3 or 4 things that really are important in purchasing a franchise?
So, great question. And this is mastermind minutes, not hours, and I need hours to explain everything.
Yeah.
But just like high level, first I want to just touch on the responsible franchising thing, if you don't mind. This is
No,
kind of
listen,
off the edge.
I think it's so important, only because I feel that people are using that term inconsistent with what it really means.
So years ago, I worked with a lady who sort of wrote the book. She's a professor at a big university in New Jersey. I'm not going to get into the details because I don't know if she wants me to talk about all this, but um, she really wrote the first book on, green climate and green activity in a business and all that stuff. And so she tapped me to help her with green franchising. So I'm going back almost 20 years. And she said something to me that always stuck. She said, one thing that bothers the heck out of me, my pet peeve, is when people greenwash their business in marketing. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? So greenwashing is saying that you're responsible in the way you run your business, but you're really not. It's just hogwash. But you're doing it, you're saying it because you think you're going to get more customers. So she's saying you have to be green cradle to grave. You can't say that you're a green business, but then you do not use electric cars for your for whatever your deliveries or whatever it might be. So she said, your building needs to be green, LED certified, like all this stuff. Um, don't just say it. She also pointed out that a lot of people do that with pink washing. So it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So now everybody's going to put a pink ribbon on their product. Meanwhile, they don't do squat to really help the cause, but they're doing it for marketing reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Now I feel that people are responsible washing the franchises. And so they're saying, we're responsible. We do this. And it's kind of like, like you said, like, hey, trust me. What do I got to do to get you into this car today?
Right.
And it's really, it's mind-boggling to me. And so I could talk for a long time about this, but responsible franchising starts with the franchisor knowing how to franchise their business. So they would hook up with a company like Franchise Growth Solutions, perhaps, with somebody that has 30, how many years of experience you have? 30
Oh,
years?
more than I care to remember. It's approaching 40. I know I don't look that old.
No, you don't. You look great. And it's because franchising is a cool place to be, and it helps you look good. So what do I got to do to get you into a franchise today? But you hook up with a company because the thing that I have found with franchises is that the founder of the franchise, they are like, all right, I'm gonna turn it into a franchise. My concept, I love it so much, and everybody could do this all over America, and they know their business, but they don't know franchising.
Yeah.
They need somebody to help them with franchising. So if you're based in New York and the first franchise you sell is in I don't know,
Colorado.
like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to support that franchise owner?
Exactly.
So you really should, you should look for businesses that are selling within a more of a region at first. That could be a helpful thing.
Yeah.
And you want to look for leadership. You want to know that the CEO, the founder of the company, had enough. He was humble enough to, or she was humble enough to raise their hand and say, I know my business, but I don't know franchising, so I need help. So I bring in Gary, and so that's great. You want to see great leadership. You want to know that, all the things that you'll find out as you study the franchise, great training, all that support, marketing, and that they're ahead of the curve. Because what we have found, and I think you'll agree, it's not your grandfather's franchise anymore. I mean, with the money that's coming in through private equity groups and stuff, franchises have the best technology now. They can hire the best leadership, the best marketing company. So it's never been easier to own and operate a franchise as a franchisee right now if you're hooked up with the right company.
Yep. Yep. So talk to me a little bit on that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but talk to me a little bit about the specifics of those things. So I met I'll tell you a very quick story. So I met a gentleman last fall at a private equity meeting, and he was looking to raise money, and it doesn't matter who he is or what the concept was, but basically he was touting that he had sold over 350 franchises in the first year and a half. Don't quote me on the number or the timeline. It was less than 2 years. I know that. And when I asked, well, okay, how many units do you have open? I forget the exact number, but it was under 50. And I thought, so you got 350 sold and you only got 50 open in 2 years. Like, the sold to open ratio, as I call it, didn't really match up. So if
Right.
I'm looking to buy a franchise, maybe you can speak to like that element. Should the franchise buyer be looking at how many franchises have these guys sold and how many are actually open? By the way, with happy and successful franchisees,
Right.
because we always hear, oh, we've got 9,478 million in development in our first year and a half. Obviously, I'm being dramatic here because the
Right.
ridiculousness of it is just beyond my comprehension. And yet they got 5 units open. So talk to me about item 20 in the FDD, sold to open. How important is that to you?
So that's utmost important. So I always coach my candidates to look at item 20. You have to realize that um, every franchise, whether it's 10 franchisees or 1,000 franchisees, around 10% are in flux. People are sick, they're selling, they're moving, they're retiring. So there's always 10%. So I get that. But if there's a ratio where you know more than 10% of the system has left in the past year, and they only brought in like three new people, there's a problem. So you have to look out for that. And then you have to look out for, as you're talking about, all right, so you sold 100 this year. How many have open? Three? That's as good as not having more than three franchises. That's all it is. So you got to be very careful about that. You have to be very careful about investigating the item 7, which is in the franchise disclosure document, which tells you how much it's going to cost you to open and operate the franchise. Um, Make sure that you have enough money, because not having enough capital is the number one reason for failure. So, so the numbers are there, but then talk to franchise owners, as many as you can, one-on-one if possible. Visit any that might be local and really understand the nuances of what it took to get that unit open. Because just ask a simple question: what was one or two surprises that the franchise didn't tell you or didn't even know to tell you?
Right,
And
right.
that'll help you. But it becomes, so the responsible franchising from where we sit is sales. But I think it goes all the way back to the very, very beginning that I don't think anybody's talking about. And that's the fact that anybody could franchise anything they want. There's no rules, regulations, laws, benchmarks. All you have to do is get a lawyer and $50,000 or $100,000, and you could get an FDD, and now you're a franchise. If you
Yep.
can find somebody to buy it, now you have a franchise owner.
Yeah.
You got to be careful when you're out there, because nobody's talking about that part of it, and
Yeah,
that's
I
where.
want to, Tom, I want to jump in a minute because that is key. Again, sorry to interrupt you. I just don't want to go too far down there. I want to unravel a couple of things for the audience. First of all, when Tom and I are talking about item 20 and item 17 and item 7, rather, what we're referring to are the 23 items that exist in what's known as a franchise disclosure document, which, for the lack of a better term, is a prospectus that the franchisor must issue to a potential franchise buyer, at least in most states, at least 14 days in advance of signing any contract. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now, the piece that you just mentioned about speaking to franchisees and are there any surprises and that sort of stuff, I think that's key. I think that's paramount. And should you said take it back to the beginning, should someone even franchise their business to begin with and then start offering franchises? So myself, my company, Franchise Growth Solutions, and there's two other development companies that I know, again, friendly competitors. I know for a fact that what we do before we will take on a client to franchise their business is we'll do a full evaluation. We'll do a full P&L review and find out, like, okay, you're running your pizza shop and you're making a lot of money, but what does that P&L look like when you add a royalty to it and you add an advertising fee and you got to have the POS system and blah, blah, blah. Can a franchisee actually make money? And then what are those, what are your Yelp reviews? Like, we scrutinize. And again, like I said, there's myself and 2 other companies. By the way, there's a whole host of franchise development companies that don't do any of that. They'll just, if you can write a check, they'll franchise your business, and then you start selling franchises to unsuspecting individuals who don't know the things that you know. So I just wanted to sort of unravel that part.
Yeah.
Franchisor, what if we're talking about what should a franchisee look at? What should the franchisor have sort of under their belt? You talked about the leadership, but what about capital? What about supply chain? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that's a big part of it. So when I had my smoothie franchise, they were happened to be based in Denver. I was in New York. Their smoothie mix was manufactured in Utah. And so they had to ship it to New York, and it was a frozen thing, and so the supply chain wasn't there. It cost me a lot more money than if I would have lived in Colorado.
Right.
So there's
Right.
like, you have to understand things like that, and it's like, why have your shop in Utah when almost 3/4 of the country lives in the Northeast?
Right.
And so you need to like look for things like that, little nuanced things where franchise coaches could help, because there's so many things to look at and it becomes overwhelming, but we help you break it down. And so we do it piece by piece. First, it's like, does this thing even make sense for you? But back up and do introspection for yourself. Can you see yourself making a 180-degree turn? And I got this little poster behind me saying, remember your why. And it's because you got to have a compelling reason to make a change. Everybody, I can't say everybody, most people would love to own their own business. It would be cool. It's flexible. You make more money than, a W-2 job and all that. But when it comes, like I always say, it's all fun and games until somebody has to